The former Australian Prime Minister Paul Keating has launched a scathing attack on an agreement for the UK and the United States to supply the country with nuclear-powered submarines.
Calling it the worst deal in history, Keating said the submarines serve no useful military purpose. The agreement between the Aukus group of countries was announced on Monday and has been strongly criticised by China. The UK, US and Australia say it's a partnership that will promote a free and open Indo-Pacific. This is the first time a loophole in the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty has been used to allow the transfer of technology and material from a nuclear weapons state to a non-nuclear weapons state.
Well, let's talk now to Alan Kuperman, who's an expert on nuclear proliferation at the University of Texas. Welcome to the programme, Alan. So, for those of us who aren't familiar with the details, what exactly does the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty involve?
Well, the Non-Proliferation Treaty is a commitment by countries who don't have nuclear weapons not to get nuclear weapons, and it's part of a larger non-proliferation regime which really focuses on preventing countries from getting either of the two ingredients that you can use to make a nuclear bomb. One is plutonium, and the other is highly enriched uranium. And since the 1970s, the world has focused on phasing out highly enriched uranium, which can be used to make nuclear weapons. And this Aukus deal will really undermine that.
So how will it undermine it, or indeed operate within the framework of the treaty?
Well, as I said, the world since the 1970s has been phasing out the use of HEU fuel except in nuclear weapons. In fact, 71 nuclear reactors around the world have been converted from highly enriched to low enriched uranium, which is unsuitable for nuclear weapons. And this Aukus submarine deal would threaten to reverse all of that progress, because Australia would receive tons of highly enriched uranium in the reactors for these submarines. That's enough for hundreds of nuclear weapons. And other countries would obviously demand the same right. And if the U.S. refused to export highly enriched uranium to them, then these countries could say, well, we're going to enrich our own uranium. Currently, there's no excuse for them to enrich uranium to high levels suitable for weapons. But this Aukus agreement would create a precedent and provide them an excuse to enrich to weapons-grade uranium, and that would be disastrous for the non-proliferation regime.
But not in this case designed for that, of course. It does use a loophole to move this nuclear material around. How does that work?
It's what's known as paragraph 14, which says that if a country declares that material is not for weapons, but is for a military purpose, i.e. submarine fuel, then that material is exempt from inspections by the UN's watchdog for decades. And that means that a country can have enough highly enriched uranium for not just one nuclear weapon, but hundreds of nuclear weapons, and the UN watchdog is prohibited from inspecting that for decades. And that obviously opens up a door for a country to divert the uranium to nuclear weapons. I'm not saying that Australia would necessarily want to do that, but Australia is going to set a precedent for other countries to be able to do that. And I think that if they go ahead with this plan, that this Aukus agreement is going to wind up causing more security problems than it possibly could prevent. I think it's going to backfire. And this could be avoided if Australia and the US and UK would just say, okay, these submarines will use low enriched uranium fuel, which, by the way, is what France uses in its submarines and what China uses in its submarines. So it's just extremely short-sighted and is likely to backfire if they proceed with this plan for nuclear weapons-grade uranium fuel in the subs.
So what could be the worst-case scenario here?
the worst case scenario would be that countries around the world say, I understand that for 50 years the world said that it's illegitimate to use highly enriched uranium, but now the US and UK and Australia have undermined that norm, and so now we're all going to produce our own highly enriched uranium, and there's nothing you can say about it because you'd be hypocrites. And so what we'll see is lots of countries following what Iran is doing and making enrichment plants. And you know what? The world is not going to bomb all of those plants, and it's not going to impose Iran-like sanctions on all of those countries. And what we'll get is widespread availability of nuclear weapons-grade uranium, which will potentially lead not only to countries acquiring nuclear weapons, but potentially terrorists stealing some of that material. You only need something like 100 pounds for a terrorist to make a nuclear weapon. But Australia will have 10,000 pounds or more of such uranium. And a country can make a nuclear weapon using higher technology from only 20 pounds of highly enriched uranium. So that's the worst case scenario. And I hope Australian, US, and UK leaders will think about that and take the prudent course.
Okay, Alan Kuperman from the University of Texas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.